Okay, so I want to start off with a little bit of an introduction, because I think a lot of people heard the term Yetzer Ra, probably learned a little bit about it. Everyone knows the famous Gemara, Barasi Yetzer Ra, Barasi Torah Tavlin, Gemara in Kedushin, I created the Yetzer Ra, I created the Torah as an antidote. And everyone knows that they have a Yetzer Ra, everyone knows that. And there's surprising discrepancy in the ways that Yetzer Ra is presented. So, for example, the Gemara Kedushin, which is source number 1 on your page, tells us, Tana Rabbanan, Kasha Yetzer Ra. Yetzer Ra is so evil, it's so bad, Shafilu Yotzro Kora Ra, because even its creator calls it evil. Shenemar quotes the pasuk, the verse in Genesis, Ki Yetzlev Adam Ramin Urav, that the inclination of a person is evil from his youth. Which means that the Almighty who created something, usually the creator of something is someone who's going to see it in favorable light, yet the creator calls it bad. Now, obviously, the name Yetzer Ra, it's bad. It's part of the name is Ra, which is bad. But the very opposing view we find in the Midrash, when the pasuk says, when the verse tells us, Vayar Elokim es kol ha'shas v'hinei tov ma'od, and the Almighty saw that everything He made, and behold, it was very good. So it says the Midrash, Tov, when it says Tov, Ze Yetzer Tov. Me'od, Ze Yetzer Ra. When the Torah tells us that the Almighty saw everything that He made and it was exceedingly good, good is referring to the good inclination. Exceedingly good is referring to the bad inclination. So how is it possible that the same entity, the Yetzer Ra, is on one hand called Ra, and the Almighty calls it Ra, on the other hand it's called Tov, or Tov Me'od, as well. And I think this really shows us why it's an important topic. Because if we didn't have the Yetzer Ra, we would be angels. If we were angels, we'd be very holy. We're humans. We're not as holy. But you know what we have? We have Torah. We have opportunity. We live in a dynamic world because we're flawed. The Gemara tells us in Shabbos that when Moshe went up to heaven to get the Torah, the angel said, "Why is this human, this flesh and blood, why is he here amongst us?" And he had to respond by saying, the humans are flawed, and therefore we have Torah, we have opportunity to become greater than the way we are. We can change. Angels can't change. And I think that, on one hand, humans are greater than angels, because an angel cannot improve, we can improve. And therefore, the Yetzer Ra is very good because life has meaning, life has a purpose in it, because we are so terribly flawed with our Yetzer Ra. So it's a good thing because it means life matters. If we didn't have a Yetzer Ra, it means that you cannot have meaning if there isn't opportunity or if there isn't change. Meaning is a function of change. We could change because we have a Yetzer Ra, and we could fight it and overcome it, and that makes us great people. Now, just as a parallel to that, Adam Rishon, Adam, before he sinned, he didn't have a Yetzer Ra. After he sinned, he became Yodea Tova Ra. We think that Adam Rishon made a terrible mistake. And we think he was duped into it with the deceptions of the Nachash. Truth is, the Gemara tells us that the Nachash never lied. The snake didn't lie. When it said that you'll become like God, Yodea Tova Ra, it didn't lie. It told him exactly what's going to happen. It's describing you're going to have a Yetzer Ra, and you'll have Tov and Ra existing within you, and thus the opportunity for choice and change. We became like God, like the Torah says. That's not me speaking. The Torah says that you became like God because you have a Yetzer Ra, and therefore we're living in this dynamic existence where we can make change, or we can make choices. And like God, we can make choices. A stick, a rock can't make choices. An angel can't make choices either. They live on a plane, whatever the plane of pre-programmed reality is. Whereas we live in a dynamic world, and therefore we can choose, and that is something fantastic. So why did Adam do it? Especially if he didn't have a Yetzer Ra to dupe him into sin. So the Bali Musar say, Adam Rishon had the choice to eat from the tree, just like you have the choice to jump into a fiery furnace. If I showed you a fire, a Lag BaOmer fire in Israel, and I said, can you or can you not jump into the fire? You would say, I can. I would never do it in a million years. It's silly to do it because it's harmful. So the way the Bali Musar say it is that Adam Rishon had a choice, a theoretical choice, to eat from the tree, but he did it even though it was insane to do it. And the reason why he did it is because he was looking at the Tov Ma'od aspect. Yes, it's crazy to someone to accept upon themselves something that even its creator calls bad, but ultimately, big picture, there is a certain benefit that humanity gains because we have a Yetzer Ra. It gives us the opportunity to overcome something. It gives us resistance, and therefore we can, therefore he opted in for that.
He did us a favor.
Right. So why is it on the sin?
Well, he did us a favor. We look at Adam Rishon as being a composite of all humanity. Right? He made a decision. He made a decision to augment the purpose in our life.
Well, without that, there would be no purpose. There would be nothing.
Well, there was purpose of Adam Rishon. He had a capacity to sin, and he could have resisted it, and he would have had little purpose. Now there's opportunity for greater purpose. After Adam Rishon sins, we have a Yetzer Ra, and that really changes what life is. Life is, right, the primary goal of life after the sin is now this battle, this war, this milchemes hayetzer, as it's known, fighting the Yetzer Ra from within. Now, I want to say that in light of what we spoke about the recent weeks, we built a model where you have a pure soul before it gets in contact with any humans, and then it gets progressively less pure the more it gets attached to the human and to this world. It gets attached to a body, it gets attached to this world, it gets the Yetzer Ra, and it becomes progressively more impure. And the goal of life is to become a tzaddik, which means to have a pure soul, i.e. to rid yourself as best you can of the influence of the Yetzer Ra. And therefore, it makes sense what you see in number 3 on your list, that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter wrote in one of his books, in one of his letters, Bishvil milchemes hayetzer hurad ha'adam la'olam. The reason why man was placed in this world, why are we here? If you could distill the goal of life, milchemes hayetzer, to fight the Yetzer Ra. So we could even say that the goal of everything, all mitzvos, all Torah, all midos, everything is to fight the Yetzer Ra. We want to get close to the Almighty. We want to have dveikus. And what's stopping us is the Yetzer Ra. Mitzvos and all the instructions we have in the Torah are there to help us achieve that. And thus, it makes sense to say that the purpose of everything is the fighting of the Yetzer Ra. I think this is really important. Because if we could say that this is really what all life is about, this battle, I think it's prudent for us to say, okay, let's try to understand what the battle's all about, what it's oriented about, what are the vulnerabilities of our enemy, and how do we potentially try to conquer it. And indeed, we see that the nature of this battle is presented very much as one of warfare. For example, the Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, Ezehu dibar hakovesh es yitzro. So it's an interesting word usage. Who is the mighty one? Someone who conquers their Yetzer Ra. It's almost as if you have a military objective to conquer something, and to be a Gibor, to be mighty, is someone who conquers the Yetzer Ra, which really presented in kind of military terminology. There's another less famous Gemara in Nidarim. The Gemara says, it brings a pasuk, a verse in Koheles, Ir Katana, a small city, v'anashim ba'amat, and few people inside the city, u'ba'ala melech gadol, and a major king came to it, v'savav osa, and encircled it, laid siege upon it, u'bana aleh mitzudim gadol, and built fortresses surrounding the city. So, very strange imagery we have being described here. Says the Gemara, what does this mean? What's this? What's a small city? Zehaguf, that's the body. Anashim ba'at, what are the various elements of that city? That's the limbs of the person. It's encircled by this very mighty king. Who's that? That's the Yetzer Ra. He laid siege to our body. We're under attack. And he built these fortresses, and those are sins. And the verse continues, Umatza ba'ish miskein v'chacham, and a person who was a miskein, who was a nebuch, but is also very intelligent, very clever. That's the Yetzer Ra. Umalat ha'ir b'chachmaso, and he saved the city with his wisdom. What's this wisdom? That's tshuva u'maisim tovim. The Adam lo zachar se'isha miskeinahu, but the person doesn't remember this savior. Why? Because when someone is involved in Yetzer Ra, they don't remember the Yetzer Tov. That's what the verse says. It builds this whole model. We have the human, and the human is under attack from all sides. He's being laid siege by the Yetzer Ra, and the Yetzer Ra is buttressing his attack on the city with sins, and the way to fight against it is with the Yetzer Tov, with the good inclination, and how so? With mitzvos and tshuva and repentance. So I think it's interesting that Chazal are portraying our battle really in military terms, and I think with the inspiration of the art of war, the first step of successful military activity is you have to know your enemy. And I think that if we want to really understand what's the best strategies and tactics to undermine this formidable foe, we have to first learn about what it does to us. What is this siege that we are subject to? And once we understand the vulnerabilities, or at least where the areas of conflict are, then we can understand how to engage upon that resistance. But also, I think we'll understand how does mitzvos and tshuva and Torah, how are they fighting back? So A, what is the hindrance? What's the Yetzer Ra? And B, the methodologies that we're employing. The Torah just gives us instructions. We just get the Torah instructions. And sometimes we don't really connect the dots. How does, mezuzah and tefillin and Shabbos and kashrus, all those things, how are they contributing in the grander scheme of things? So I want to try to look at some of the ways Chazal, some of the ways our sages present the Yetzer Ra, and just to see what we can draw out from that about what it is and how it operates. Because once we know what it is and how it operates, we understand how to fight back, and maybe we can even understand how Torah and mitzvos play a part. So the famous Gemara in Brachos is this talking about prayer, and it gives a description of a prayer that one of the rabbis would pray. Rabbi Alexandri, this Rabbi Alexander, after he prayed, he would say the following prayer, additional post-prayer supplication. Ribono Olam, Master of the worlds, Galu v'yadua, it's known lefanecha, before you. Sheritzoneinu lasas ritzonecha. We want to do your will. The truth is, if you were to isolate our essence, if you look at our neshama, we want to do the will of God. What's the problem? Umima akev. So what is standing in our way? Se'or shebe'isa, the yeast in the dough, v'shibud malchios, and our submission to the king. You hear some fanech, may be your will before you, shetasleinu miyadam, you'll save us from their hands, v'nashuv, and we will return, lasas chuter tznecha b'lev Hashem, we'll return to do your will with a total heart. So, what he says is that we really want to do the will of God. It's just that there's two things standing in front of us. One of them is the yeast in the bread, which is the element in the food that causes bread to rise. And the other thing is shibud malchus, that we're subjected to the melech, to the king. The kings rule us, and that's what's stopping us. Very strange thing. So Rashi tells us, right, a very famous Rashi, that the sa'ar shebe'isa, this yeast in the dough, is referring to Yetzer Ra. Yetzer Ra hamachmitzeinu, who causes us to become like chametz, to get excited, so to speak, for sin, and shibud malchus. So my question, I think, just to try to understand what these things are. What is shibud malchus? Why can't we fulfill Torah? Why can't we do the will of God because of shibud malchus? Shibud malchus, the king is in control. We're under the thumb of foreign leadership. What does that have to do with anything? Like, if you were to make a list of the things that stop us from observing Torah and mitzvahs and doing the will of God, I don't imagine that being submitted to the king is so high on the list. Maybe during the times of the Romans it was a bigger problem, But it seems strange, like we think we have bad midos, and then we're lazy, and we have other things that are distracting us. There's a lot of reasons that really stop us from observing. You can't say, the government. The government's the problem, like what Ronald Reagan said, right? The most terrifying sentence is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Government's not here to help. So I want to just try to understand what this Gemara means. I'm convinced that there are really two approaches that the Yetzer Ra uses in his war against us, which is going to be very helpful for our resistance against him. And that's represented A, by the yeast in the bread, and B, by the Shibud Malchias. I.e., when Rashi tells us that this is referring to the Yetzer Ra, it's actually telling us the two different types of Yetzer Ra. One of them he describes very enigmatically, yeast in the bread, yeast in the dough. Other one is submission to the kingdom. What does that mean? So let's look at some of the sources here. So, source number one, we've seen this before, is a debate between Rabbi Judah the Prince and Antoninus. And they're talking about at what point in the development of the child do they get a Yetzer Ra. But the words that they use are very illustrative. Amar Antoninus l'Rebbe, says Antoninus to Rebbe, Me'ei masai Yetzer Hara sholet ba'adam. When is the Yetzer Ra, when do they dominate the person? At what point of the development do they dominate the person? Mishas Yetzira and Mishas Yetzia, from the formation of the child or from the exit of the child. And they debated, ultimately they concluded from the exit. But the word that it uses is sholet. Sholet is the word shlita, from control, from dominion, right? They have absolute dictatorship over the person. They're total bosses. That happens at birth. Which sounds interesting, like we're describing Yetzer Ra potentially as Shibud Malchias, and we see that it does use the term normally designated for a king, that a king is a sholet. A sholet is a king, and that's a description of the Yetzer Ra's vise-like control that he has over us. And it happens at birth. Additionally, the Gemara in Shabbos tells us, we've seen this one as well, Lo yeh b'cha el zar, you should not have within you a foreign god. What does it mean? Ezehu el zar sheyesh begufo shel adam. What is this foreign god that exists within the person? Ze Yetzer Ra. So earlier it describes the Yetzer Ra as a sholet, as a control of a king. Now it's describing as a foreign god, as a master, as a power over a person. And thirdly, we see, very similarly, the Gemara in Kiddushin tells us that Amar Reb Shimon bar Levi, Yitzro shel Adam misgaber alav b'chol yom. The Yetzer Ra of a person overpowers a person every day. Another terminology of power over a person. That's number one. And I think the way my grandfather used to explain this was that sometimes when we follow the bidding of the Yetzer Ra, it's not because we decide to do it, we're inspired to do it, we're motivated to do it, we're lustful, none of that. Sometimes we do it because we're just a serf. We just follow instructions without asking questions. There is a realm a power the Yetzer Ra has over a person that we just obey their bidding, their instructions, the Yetzer Ra's instructions. He has control over us, and we never could imagine life any other way. I sometimes talk to students of mine, and just the notion of someone observing Shabbos. So that, it's so beyond the wildest imagination of some people to think that they could observe Shabbos, that it's not even it's not something you would consider. It would be, and the reason why is because the Yetzer Ra assumed that control over the person in that area, and therefore it's treasonous to suggest otherwise. It's just, this is the way things are, and it's unimaginable to change. It's not like someone says, nothing I desire in the world more than using my phone on Shabbos. No, there's no desire. It's not like the Yetzer Ra creates desire. We don't think Yetzer Ra, you have a passion, you have an inclination, you have a desire. No, it's just that they are a subject of the Yetzer Ra's kingdom. He tells them to jump. They say how high. And that's why they sin, on one hand. Additionally, we have this yeast in the bread. And what the role that yeast plays in a dough is really not nutritional. It doesn't contribute to the nutrition. It contributes to the development of the appearance, so to speak, of the nutrition. It changes the perception of the food, but doesn't change the nutrition. So if you actually take a matzah that doesn't have any yeast and bread, and you examine them, the ingredients are the same. They're both flour and water, but the only difference is one you have yeast and one you don't have yeast. But the way it's perceived is dramatically different. One of them is this flat pancake cracker, flat cracker that's just no one's inspired at all to eat it. On the other hand, you have the bread, which is very, very luscious and very soft and very melt in your mouth. And what this is describing another role that the Yetzer Ra does. Yetzer Ra takes matzah, which you need, right? You need nutrition, you need sustenance. And it injects a little squirt of yeast into it. And what it does is it transforms something that you need for your sustenance, something that the nutrition, it turns it into an experience. It takes olam hazeh, this world, and its pleasures, and augments them and amplifies them and causes us to not see life clearly. We're here in this world, we know, as a means to get olam haba, to get the next world. Therefore, what's our role vis-a-vis this world? Well, this world, that's a means. This is a stepping stone towards a bigger goal. Says the Yetzer Ra, no, in this world, in the matzah world, you need the sustenance, right? You need this world, right? We all need this world. But is it a focus? Is it an ends? Or is it a means? He turns it from a means into an ends. He throws a little dab of yeast into it and turns it into an experience. And that is tremendously harmful for a person, because if you're living under the influence of the Yetzer Ra, you change your priorities. This world becomes the purpose, next world you forget about. And that is the most harmful thing that could possibly happen. And we're under assault of the Yetzer Ra because it's constantly forcing us to think about this world as a priority. And by doing that, we lose sight of olam haba. There is a Gemara, very hard to understand Gemara, that describes that the greater someone is, the bigger their Yetzer Ra is. Now that might just be where the Yetzer Ra is located in these two arenas. It might be that it's more stacked towards one versus the other, and someone who's, let's say, Tinish Nishba, will be stacked in the opposite direction. The Gemara says in Kiddushin, so the Gemara says, Yetzer Shal misgaber ala b'chol yom, and the next Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Yetzer Shal Adam mischadesh ala b'chol yom. So one is, which means it renews itself every day. It has the element of chidush, of insight, of novelty every day. And these two, there's the Yetzer Ra of misgaber, of overpowering, and there's the Yetzer Ra of mischadesh, of renewal, of innovation, of excitement, of the yeast in the bread, and these are the two approaches that the Yetzer Ra is using to attack us. I have a mashal, like parable, to this idea. We have if you go on a road trip, so you got to stop every couple of hours to get gas and to go to the bathroom, and maybe you go inside and buy a little Mountain Dew, whatever, right? All the kids suddenly need to go to the bathroom 5 minutes after you pass the rest stop. That's what it always was. In Texas, they developed a new kind of rest stop. It's Buc-ee's, right?
We have to stop at Buc-ee's.
Right, so Buc-ee's changes everything. Buc-ee's, it's enormous. You've been to there, right? It's really big. It's so clean, you can't imagine. You can lick the floors there. And they sell like toys and memorabilia, and people put up pictures on the, yeah, it's a destination. And to me, this is a perfect example of what the Yetzer Ra is like Buc-ee's. So we're on this road trip, and we're trying to get to a destination. And you drive to a destination, you're in the car, you're cramped up, right? It's not the ideal conditions. And every once in a while, you got to stop off and kind of recharge. But you realize that you're just there to stop, get the gas, get the necessities, get the fuel, inject some matzah, and continue on your journey. comes along Bucky's and they say, no, 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 no. This is not just a stop along the way to just get, this is a destination. So Olam Hazeh, this world, we forget you're in Bucky's, you settle down there, you go to all the attractions, you forget that you're on a journey. You forget, like this is not suboptimal conditions. This is the place where I want to go. I go there on a Cholmei trip. And that is very dangerous. Well, and not to go to Bucky's in this example, but in our example, because you could do that and then you never get back on the road. And you forget about the road and you just settle down along the way, and that is very harmful. Now, I think another way to present this idea is that the Yetzer Ra, when it renews this world, it causes distortion. So the Gemara tells us that Olam Hazeh, this world, is domel lechoshech, domel lelayla. It's nighttime, and in nighttime there's room for distortion. There's a very famous Mesilas Yesharim who tells us that someone who's under the thumb of their Yetzer Ra, they don't see truth. The reality is still reality, but they have no idea what the reality is. They don't realize they're on a road trip. They settle down in the rest stop permanently. And the way he describes it, you can't see the truth, because the Yetzer Ra literally blinds his eyes, and as if you're walking in the darkness. And you walk in the darkness, how could you not get into trouble? How you cannot bump into things? And worse than that, worse than actually bumping into things, is mistakenly assuming that one thing is fusing, conflating two things with each other. That is indeed what the Yetzer Ra does. It causes this chidush, this sa'ar shebeisa, this mischarish al b'chol yom, there's renewal. It changes the reality of our life by causing us the truth is obscured. We don't see the truth, and therefore we confuse what's real and what's permanent and what ought to be our purpose with what is ephemeral and transient and passing and ought to be nothing more than matzah that we just use along our journey. Now, and thus, these two forces together are really forces to be reckoned with the Yetzer Ra. And, when we sin, sometimes the sin is because you get so excited and so caught up with the desire that it's hard to fight. It's hard to fight back because it's so overwhelming. And the Gemara even allows for that. The Gemara says sometimes the Yetzer Ra is just more powerful than someone can imagine. We're going to read next week's parasha about Judah. Judah sins with a prostitute who happens to be his daughter-in-law. Really a shameful, scandalous story. Well, certainly it's a scandal. So what happened over there? What's going on with Yehuda? Who's one of the tzaddikim? He's going after a prostitute. It's really embarrassing, this story. So the Medrash tells us is that the Yetzer Ra, the Malach HaMamuna al Taiva, there's an angel who is in charge of the levers of desire. He came and he just turned it all the way to the end and removed any nisayon, any bechira. He just upped the ante. He made it so irresistible that it was literally irresistible. And sometimes, we don't have that, but we sin because there's a certain degree of irresistibility to sin. Okay, so that's what the Yetzer Ra is, I think, in a simplistic level. Now, how would you combat that? So my grandfather used to always say, is that if the Yetzer Ra comes with we could sin because we're excited to do it. We could also sin because we have a foreign god, we have a ruler, we have a master, we have a shul. The Yetzer Ra just tells us what to do, we follow. We're just obedient without even being inspired, so to speak, to do that. Now, how would we fight back? We got to find a way to create a parallel with regards to the holiness. We too should try to be inspired about mitzvos, to try to find meaning and excitement and joy in their fulfillment, and also to incorporate within ourselves a commitment to do it even when we're not inspired. And kind of using this two powers that he has, the koach hachidush, a power of renewal that we have from the Yetzer Ra, we'll fight it with the power of renewal from the Yetzer Tov. A power of overpowering, we'll fight it with overpowering with regards to Ruchnias. Now, if that's what the Yetzer Ra is, just quickly to finish off here. So how do you fight the Yetzer Ra? I think there's a lot of different ways to fight the Yetzer Ra. It's a war. We're being attacked on multiple fronts. We're surrounded. We're under siege. And there's different ways to fight. I would say perhaps that you want to weaken your enemy, you want to decimate the enemy, will be even better. Even better than decimating the enemy is turning the enemy into an ally, or eliminating the existence of the enemy. And we find in Chazal variations of all these different ways to fight the Yetzer Ra, because there are multiple ways. And indeed, we'll do that hopefully next year. I want to just finish off here with these last few sources here, just to see how nicely this works out. So the Rambam tells us, the Rambam is describing how do you become a prophet? How do you become a Navi? So we think the Maya comes to talk to you. The Rambam says, no, you work on yourself, you fight your Yetzer Ra, and you automatically become a prophet. Remember, we said our premise was that the only thing that really matters is fighting your Yetzer Ra. That's the only thing that really matters. Thus, anything that matters is a result of that. Says the Rambam, Ein nevuah chala elo chacham gadol, b'chachma you have to be a chacham, gibor, v'lo yehei yitzro misgaber alav, b'davar ba'olam. You do not have Yetzer Ra miskaber on you in any manner. Ella hu miskaber al yitzro. What he's describing is that in the realm of miskaber, you overpower it. And automatically you have nevuah. What's even greater than someone to be a navi, to be a prophet? Someone to live in olam haba. The Gemara tells us in Baba Basra, two Gemaras, one after another. 3 people tasted olam haba in this world: Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And the very next Gemara, Shlosha lo shalat bahen Yetzer Ra. They didn't have the shlita, the power of the Yetzer Ra on top of them. And who's that? Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Says my grandfather. I saw this last week. He says, when someone achieves a level that the Yetzer Ra has absolutely no shlita over, no power over them, they don't need to be miskaber. They don't need to overwhelm them. You know why? Because they reach a level where you're no longer fighting. If you're miskaber on your Yetzer Ra, if you're overpowering it, there's still a struggle. You're still involved in the struggle. You have to overpower it. Great, you're a tzaddik. But when someone is low shalab on Yetzer Ra, there's no Yetzer Ra at all, i.e. the Yetzer Ra became good, he became an ally, he's not a threat anymore, then you're told all above. Then you're even a higher level than a prophet. You're already existing in this other world. Of course, we have to start from the bottom up. That's high level. But this really shows that there's different elements of the Yetzer Ra's control over us and the way he engages with us in battle. And there's a whole series of ways that we can overcome and fight and battle back and hopefully be successful in this most vital journey of our lives.